Hello, folks. This is Scott Taransky and Joanne Miller. We're with the National Center for Biblical Parenting, and in this particular session, we're going to target some specific areas of parenting. We're going to work with teenagers in particular, and we're going to start this webinar by spending the first half or so working with one particular family. Mom's name is Michelle. After we do that for a while, we're going to unmute everyone else or allow people to ask questions. There's a way for you in this webinar to raise your hand by clicking some kind of a button, and when you do so, then we'll know that you want to ask a question, and in that second part of our webinar, we'll try to troubleshoot some other areas. We know that every family is different, and especially in this area of working with teenagers and emotions, things can get all over the place. So we're going to try and develop some action plans or give some ideas to Michelle and her family, and then we will try to give some other ideas that may apply in other situations. Please don't assume that the solutions that we're giving for Michelle's family apply to everyone. They don't. We're trying to develop a plan for her and her child, and we'll help others develop some solution as we go through. Okay? All right, Joanne, please unmute Michelle.
Okay.
Michelle, I just want to ask you a few questions here to get us started. Could you tell me, please, the ages of the children that live in your home?
13 and 3.
13 and 3. And do you have a husband living in this home with you too?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and are
He's the father of both children.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. Can you tell me the 13-year-old's name, please?
Eric.
All right, we'll be focusing on Eric here today. Okay, that's good. Why don't you tell me what's going on in your home and how we can help you?
I thought a lot about that today as I was trying to figure out how to present or ask my questions in a concise manner, and it's just not going to happen. I'm going to be all over the place.
Okay.
So I apologize to everyone.
That's okay. At some point I might interrupt you and start asking questions, but why don't you start by giving me some feedback and some background on your situation?
Sounds good. Eric is 13, and I would say for the past year or so, his relationship and mine has gotten further and further apart. I'm having a hard time understanding the teenage mind, especially the male mind. His father and him are developing a very close relationship, so I know that there is some connection going on there. He's not completely pulling away from everyone, but I do get the anger outbursts. We do have a lot of the circular, why can't I do this? Why are you saying no? And we're having the typical teenage, I'm tired, I can't do anything stuff going on.
Okay.
So, I'm not quite sure how to phrase my question, except, a lot of it is just when the emotions come into play, his and mine, I have a hard time kind of backing off and letting go when I see this disrespect, what I consider to be disrespect, back talk, and things like that. So it's hard for me to know what's normal, I guess, is kind of where I'm coming from.
Okay, and I can talk to you about what's normal, but normal's all over the board in the teenage years. And furthermore, our goal isn't normal. Our goal is to be spiritual and moving towards some responsibility, self-control, all those things. So that's our goal. We're going to take Eric from where he is right now, and we're going to take him somewhere. That's what we want to do. And it sounds to me like we're going in the relationship with you. There's some tumultuous things going on, and so we want to make some changes in that whole dynamic. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Let me ask you a few questions. How's Eric doing at school?
We are a homeschool family.
Okay.
And we are having a difficult time this year getting going, keeping going, staying motivated.
Okay, and you're the primary one doing the homeschooling, is that correct?
Up until this year, yes. Since we've been having so many issues, I have been getting a lot of my husband's help, but, he has a full-time job outside the home that takes him away, many nights, so it's challenging to put too much onto him.
All right, that makes sense. And so would you say that Eric is on grade level in his homeschooling or falling behind or moving ahead? How would you say he's doing?
For this year, he's falling behind.
Okay. Is that because he's
completely not doing the work?
He's not completing assignments.
Correct.
Okay. And so that must make a good part of your day an emotionally challenging experience because you're trying to get him to do something and he's refusing or resisting or something along that line. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, tell me some other things that Eric likes to do. Is he into video games?
He has a few. We don't have any of the systems, but he does have a few video games that he plays on the computer.
Okay.
He enjoys gaming, which is you make a model or 20 or 40, you build an army, and you play a game moving pieces of your army. It's called Warhammer, and he spends a lot of his time building these figures, painting these figures, modifying them, and then playing the game. And he does that with his dad.
Okay, so he really enjoys doing that, and that's a great experience. I'm grateful that Dad's involved here and has a good relationship with him. That's really good news. So we're going to use that as an asset here in your relationship with Eric. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Let's. What are the kinds of things does he do? Is he involved in any kind of sports or music or homeschool co-op or anything like that?
He plays soccer on a very recreational level here in town. We're only 2.5 years into our new town, and he's still kind of finding his friends in this area. We are involved in our homeschool group where we used to live. So we still travel down there, which is about an hour and 20 minutes back to our home group, and we do that once a week, so we can both reconnect with our friends. And that's a semi-academic this year. Last year there was a full science class. This year it's more of an elective class.
Sure. Okay.
But there's no. He was involved in a choir, but this year he's kind of opted out of that.
Okay. Let me ask you a question. If I were asking Eric the question, Eric, it sounds to me like you have a problem with your mom and you get angry with her a lot. Why don't you tell me why that is? How do you think Eric would respond?
She doesn't shut up.
Oh, that's interesting. What does that mean?
That means that I will beat an issue to death with him, or so he thinks.
So what you mean is
And I don't know, on one hand that might be true. This is what I need you to do, and this is why I need you to do it. And then if it's not done, or I'm just reminding you it needs to be done, before we get to that point. And a lot of that, again, revolves around school because we're having such a challenging year this year.
Yes.
Okay, this is your week, now we're at Wednesday. This is your week, now we're at Thursday. I know, comes from him, yet I'm still not seeing the work and the progress. So now I'm very emotionally involved in the schedule that I have made for him.
Yes.
And he's not doing the work that I know he can do. If he was having a problem with it, I would have much more sympathy for what's going on.
Okay, you're saying he's very capable of doing the work. It's just that there's some other dynamics going on for him that are they're hindering his progress.
In my opinion, yes.
All right, let's go back here and let me just ask a couple more questions. What time does he go to bed at night usually?
11, maybe 12 sometimes. I mean, he's in his room, so it's hard to know what time he falls asleep.
Okay, is he playing with computer in there, or what's he doing in his room?
No, the only thing he has in his room is a CD player. So he listens to the radio or he listens to books on tape. But he does his hobbies. His modeling is in there, so he might be working on his stuff.
Okay.
Because that's his hobby room.
All right. And then he gets up at what time in the morning?
10-ish.
Okay. And does he get up easy, hard? Is that difficult? I mean, how's that working when he wakes up in the morning?
Sometimes it's very easy. We went through a period where it was impossible to wake him up. And we went to the doctor to make sure he didn't have anything physically wrong with him.
Good.
And all the tests came back clean, which was good. But he did grow, 2 inches. So
sure.
That could have been it.
Yeah. Makes sense.
That's a lot of growing.
All right. Does he have trouble falling asleep at night?
I think he has trouble stopping. He'll be tired at 8 or 9 o'clock, but he won't go to bed. He'll take a nap in the middle of the day. Sometimes it's a short nap, sometimes it's a long nap if he's very tired. And that obviously will then adjust his tired schedule for evening time. But I get up maybe at 2 o'clock in the morning to use the bathroom, and he's awake. So not all the time, mind you, but I would say 1 or 2 nights out of 10, he's awake at that hour.
Okay.
And I'm just like, I've been exhausted for 3 hours. What are you doing?
All right.
Those mornings obviously are more challenging to get him up than others. So,
imagine.
on one hand, yes, he has a hard time falling asleep because I don't think he lets himself just chill.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. Let me start throwing some ideas your way as you're developing a plan for Eric in order to move forward, okay?
Okay.
First of all, let me just help you understand that there are 3 stages to adolescence, and your son is in the first one, okay?
Okay.
The first stage of adolescence is characterized by more emotionally driven behavior. What that means is that he tends to do what he feels like doing. If he feels like eating junk food, he eats junk food. If he feels like staying up late, he stays up late. If he feels like yelling at you, that's what he does. He tends to be moody. There's this attitude. All of that's fed by this first stage of adolescence, which has emotionally driven behavior. It's just part of what happens at that stage. That doesn't mean it's justifiable. It doesn't mean that it's good. It just means that that's part of the development that we need to work with in the midst of all of this. Okay, so some of that he doesn't even understand. Likely he's just reacting to what he feels, and he's making decisions based on how he feels. The first stage of adolescence usually goes from about 12 to 16, give or take a year. And so what we're going to see probably as he moves into the second stage of adolescence, we're going to see more of a mission-oriented view of life. The judgment faculty of his brain starts to develop more thoroughly in that stage of adolescence than in the first stage. So obviously we have a predicament developmentally. We've got emotionally driven behavior without the judgment faculties kicking in that happen in another stage of adolescence. So we're going to try to import some of those into this stage. One of the things that we know about the second stage of adolescence is that children tend to have some kind of a mission that changes their early behavior. For example, they say, I'm going to be an athlete, therefore I'm going to take care of my body and I'm not going to eat junk food. Or I'm going to go to college, so I'm going to study harder instead of just playing with other things instead. Or I'm going to work with the stock market, and so therefore I'm going to study those kinds of things in my early adolescence. So we want to import some of this, and so having conversations with him about what he's going to do in the future may help him with that, but we're trying to give him some purpose, help him understand where he's going, and that will help him in this natural stage of moving from stage 1 to stage 2. Now, that poses a problem that I think you'll understand, because in the first stage of adolescence, a child tends to not have the self-discipline and the self-control necessary to manage life decisions. Most 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds need other governing factors in their lives to keep them on track. That's what we call external motivation. Our goal in using external motivation, that is a parent's saying this is what we're working on now, or whatever it might be, when the parent starts using that structure we're building, then our goal is to build internal motivation in the child to see that yes, you can get this job done and it will work. We give children, and this is an important principle you're going to want to share with Eric, that we give kids more freedom when they're demonstrating responsibility. Eric, in some ways, is not being responsible in his relationship with you. That he's not responding well to his instructions, his tasks that need to get done. He's not responding well when he doesn't get what he wants. He's not handling himself well when you come and tell him he needs to do something. He resists that. All of that is a poor response to you, and we're going to define that for him because it's a problem. And as he grows in the teenage years, we're looking for responsibility in 4 areas in order to give him freedom. This is the whole issue in the teen situation, okay? Kids want freedom, and we want to give them freedom, but that freedom has to be tied to responsibility. I'm looking for freedom. I'm looking for responsibility in 4 areas. 1 is your responsibility at home. That has to do with chores. It has to do with relationships with the other people in this house. It has to do with adding energy to this family. So that's one. Second one is with your school. At school, or here in your case, homeschooling, if you're responsible with your schooling, that's going to be the second thing I'm looking for. Number three, which may not apply to you right now, has to do with a job. Now, older teenagers, as they're getting to be 15, 16, 17 years old, they get jobs and they need to be doing well at their job in order to have the freedom to drive a car or whatever we're going to deal with at those ages. You're not there yet. You're just still in the first stage of adolescence. But I just want you to know that's one of the areas we're measuring in order to give freedom. The fourth area we're measuring here in order to give freedom has to do with how you're doing at church, youth group, you're participating in church. That's not necessarily spiritual growth. It's just, are you going to church? Are you participating in church activities? We're praying that that's going to do something in their heart, but we're trying to measure their responsibility in these four areas. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
With responsibility comes freedom. If he's not being responsible, and already you're telling me he's not being responsible at home and he's not being responsible with his schooling, those are two different issues. Let's not mix the two together, okay? Although you're the teacher, and that complicates things a bit in this dynamic, there are two areas where he's struggling in being responsible. One is in his relationship with you, and the other is in his schooling assignments. Those are two different things that he's struggling with. Therefore, it's probably appropriate for you to use a consequence that we call limiting freedom. Okay, that's a very appropriate consequence for the teen years. So you're going to use that consequence of limiting freedom. And we're going to limit his freedom. That is, we're going to limit his choices that he has in the midst of this. One of those choices is going to be what time he goes to bed at night. It probably would be best for you to tell him that you can have the freedom to stay up later at night if you're getting your schoolwork done. If your schoolwork is not getting done, that is, you have an assignment, and I'm assuming you've written out these assignments. You're telling me you have an agenda for this week. And in that agenda for this week, you have the tasks that need to be done. If you're getting done your tasks for today, you can have more freedom about what time you go to bed. If you don't get your tasks done today, then we're going to eliminate the excuse of being tired by requiring a bedtime, which I think at 13 years old would be appropriate to be somewhere between 9 and 10 o'clock. I'm not saying that's the law, and certainly as a homeschooling family, you have the freedom to adjust that because of your schedule. But I would suggest that you're going to say that's going to be the limit. Now, in order to do that, you're going to probably have to adjust some of the things in his room. He's not going to have a CD player listening to audiobooks, and he's not going to have his craft supplies or his game supplies in there to engage in those kind of activities. So we may have to remove some of those things from his room to limit his freedom. But when you take away his freedom, you don't take away that freedom for a month or even a week. What you say to him, I'm taking away your freedom until you demonstrate to me that you're being responsible. And when you're responsible, then you can have the freedom back. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I would consider this piece that I'm telling you now to be the firmness part of your plan. There's several different parts of a good plan. One piece is firmness, consequences, and I would suggest that in this case you're limiting freedom in various different ways. There are other ways that might exhibit some firmness, but at least that's a good way to get started here. Firmness is one piece of your plan. There's 5 parts to a good plan. I hate to just say that because I'm going to cover them all, but there's 5 parts to a good plan. One of them is firmness. The second one is prayer, and so you want to be praying for him every morning when you get up. And it sounds to me like you need to be praying for 2 things with him. One is that God will keep you under control. You'll have the self-control to deal with your son who his resistance can cause you to feel angry. So you want to pray for self-control inside of you. A second thing you want to pray is that God will change his heart. A third thing you want to pray is for relational connectedness. Now this is a very important part, something that we need to talk about, because I want to increase the relational points that you have with your son. Okay, and frankly, homeschooling decreases the points, because homeschooling, now this isn't in all families, but in your situation, homeschooling represents a task that needs to get done. All tasks in family life decrease energy in the family. If we got to get the clothes washed and cleaned and folded and put away, that takes energy out of family life. The task of dealing with food, that's buying the food, getting the food on the table, that's all a task, and it drains energy from the family. In your case, homeschooling is a task. The task of homeschooling, although it may draw you close together sometimes, you may have the joy of experiencing the benefit of watching your child learn or discover new things, it's still a task, and it creates an energy drain on your relationship. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You may at a point decide that the drain on your relationship will motivate you to cease the homeschooling and transfer the homeschooling, the education, to a teacher in a Christian school or a public school, allowing you to be the coach and the parent without being the teacher at the same time. I'm not saying you have to do that, but
Right.
But if it gets to some point, you may choose to do that. Does that make sense?
Definitely on the table.
Okay, well that's good. I think it should be on the table for every homeschooler should be asking that question, because the primary goal here is not academic excellence. The primary goal is character development and relationship with our kids. That's very important as we're working with our children. And so we're paying a tax now for the benefits of homeschooling, of which there are many, and the tax is on your relationship. So you want to be praying for relational connectedness, and I want to show you how to develop that now, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like you to take a piece of paper, and I want you to list down 5 levels of communication, because in these 5 levels of communication will enable you to have heart-like communication with your son, and you're trying to develop a relational connectedness with him. And here's the principle. You have to put pressure on his life every day, and he can only take as much pressure as the relationship allows. So we need to do some extra work in the relationship building department. And I want to show you how to do that, because I think that will decrease the temptation, although you still have a task to do. It's going to allow your relationship to be able to manage the task more appropriately. Make sense?
Okay.
The first level of communication is greeting. It's very surface kind of communication, but it's the oil that makes things work. I would greet him every day when he wakes up in the morning. Hi, Eric. Good morning. Or at the end of your day, when you say good night to him, good night, Eric. See you tomorrow. Every day you're greeting him. If you leave the house and come back, you say, hey, Eric, how you doing? So you're greeting him. Very important part of what's happening. The second level of communication has to do with facts and information. So facts and information deal with, let me tell you about the weather today. Let me tell you about the events that are happening in our schedule today. Or tell me about the work that you accomplished yesterday. I'd like to have a report about the facts here, about our schoolwork. So that's dealing with facts. The next part moves us into the heart. The third level of communication has to do with opinions and judgments. Opinions and judgments is the area in which we're trying to interact with kids about how the ideas that they have about life. What is your opinion about math, Eric? What is your opinion about English? Okay, those are very important things. Opinions and judgments. What is your opinion of the conflict we're having? And we might be able to do that, or that's kind of a different level of communication. We're moving down to the heart. We're talking about opinions and judgments, a very important part of communication. A fourth part of communication has to do with emotion. How are you feeling about that? And he's experiencing a lot of emotion, so we may develop that a little bit more. It sounds like you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling disappointment, you're feeling angry with me because I'm telling you what to do. Any of those things are emotions, and we can talk about some of those things. So we want to try to explore that if we can. And the fifth level of communication is a spiritual commitment, a spiritual communication where we're praying together, or we are worshiping the Lord together, or serving the Lord together, something like that. So that's a spiritual form of communication. It's the deepest kind of communication that any two people can enjoy in their relationship together. Now, what I'd like to see you do as part of your plan, I know we're trying to deal with anger in him, but part of your plan has to be to build relationship with him. And these 5 levels of communication, you want to look for ways that you can go as deep as you can. And when he starts resisting, you pull back. That's okay. But you're looking for ways to take an interest in his life. His gaming, for example, that he's doing, or the CD that he's listening to with his book on tape. Any of those things that you can take an interest in would be helpful for you to find out more about his opinions and judgments and his feelings. You're moving down in the heart, and as you do that, then you become more emotionally connected together. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Emotions are a way that we connect. It sounds like he's connecting well with his dad emotionally, but his dad probably has some ideas for you that you may want to listen to as well. That may help you. Mm-hmm. Now, Let's go into specifically. There are some things that make him annoyed or angry with you, and I'd like to talk about those before we open the phone lines. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
One of the things that he's concerned about is that you're saying that he's frustrated with you because you talk more than he wants to listen. And I want you to understand why you do that, because he needs to understand that. Eric, I want to talk to you about the way I communicate with you, because I think we can make some improvement here. I know that sometimes you feel like I talk too much. Would you agree with that, Eric? And he would say yes. Okay, Eric, I'd like to work on a plan with you in order to reduce that. Would you help me out with that? Okay, so because I don't want to be irritating you, but sometimes I feel like I have to use a lot of words because I get the idea or the impression that you're not listening to what I'm saying. You're not paying attention to me. So I feel like if I talk more, maybe you'll get it. Would you help me with that? And so we're going to try to get some cooperation here from him to say, look, here's what I'll do. I would like to talk less to you, but what I need from you is some feedback that you got it, what I'm saying. All right? Would you do that with me? So here's what I want to do. Eric, what are some ideas? How can we make this happen together? I don't want to over-talk, and I'd like you to communicate that you're listening. Can we work on a plan that you identify that you've heard it without sticking your hand up in my face or something that says, I've heard enough? Maybe you could say, okay, Mom, I've got it. What you're saying is, and if you repeat back what I'm saying to you, I'd feel like you'd got it and I wouldn't have to talk so much. Would you work with me on that? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Michelle?
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to do is open up new avenues dealing with the relational dynamic between you and your son. How we get things done in this family. And if talking more than you like would be helpful for me to change that, I'm willing to change. Would you be willing to change too? I would really like us to have a more improved relationship together. Let's work on this together. Can you do that? That's what I want. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, let me just... All right, now what we want to do is we want to go to another area of responsibility, and that is his schoolwork. Eric, you're 13 years old now, and I would like to transfer more responsibility of your schoolwork to you. I think that'll help you. I'd like to help set the goals for you for the week. So this is the plan. This is what we need to accomplish. I'd like you to tell me this is Monday through Friday. Now, you can either look at the whole week and you can say, here's what I'm going to do on every day. I'll take that. Or today's Monday. Let's let you be a little bit more involved in the process. If you will be responsible, that is, get your schoolwork done, I'll let you help decide in what order we get that done in order to accomplish our goals for this day or this week. A week might be too long to allow him to have some control in this, but what we're saying is let's work together. Now, I'll give you freedom to help set the schedule here as long as you're being responsible to get the tasks done. If you're responsible, then you get to choose. If not, then you don't. Now, here's the thing. We have to get our work done before we have other privileges to be involved in. So either you're going to get your work done with me, or you're not going to be able to play with your other activities or do your other things. You're going to miss out on some of the things you would like to do with your dad, like gaming. You know, you play that with your dad, and he really likes to do that. But if he's got to come home and work with you on your math, that's going to deprive you of some of your activities. Let's work hard. Let's get things done so that you can have more time to do some of those fun things you enjoy doing. I would not take him out of soccer, for example, because soccer is a great way for other leaders and authorities to be involved in his life. Somebody else is telling him, quick, do it faster. You know, at soccer, they're telling him, do the right thing. Not just you. And so other leaders and authorities in his life are a very important part of the process. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what I'm trying to do is, what you want to do is, you got to sit down with Eric and develop an Eric plan. Very important. Mm-hmm. This is an Eric mom plan to get the task of homeschooling done here. Or can we do it together? If we can't do it together, we're going to lose the privilege of homeschooling, and maybe you need to go back to school. If that's what needs to happen, then we can make that happen. But I'd rather keep you at home, and I'd rather do schooling at home, because if we're working at home, then we can make this happen. So that's what I want to do with you. I want to try to get this going in the right direction with you in order to stay on track. If we can make that happen, then we're good to go. So what we're trying to do is develop a working plan with Eric, and we're saying, Eric, this is what needs to happen. Now, I think your husband could be very helpful in this by visioning a positive future for Eric. Eric, I'm leaving for the day. I'd really like to have a good report when I get home. I'll be eager to hear what you're doing. Son, we're partners here at home. We're doing, you and I, we're the men here. You're an adolescent. You're growing toward adulthood. We need to work hard. Our job is to add energy to this family. I'd really like to see you doing some of that here. I'm going to get a report. Not so much a report on how much you finished in your schooling. I want a report about how you did with your mom. I'm sending you on a mission to work with your mom. So if you feel like your mom's not treating you fairly, I want you to learn how to relate to her, even in the midst of that. You do good. You just hang in there. Do the right thing. I want to hear a report of you doing the right thing, making the job that your mom has of schooling you easier. So what we're trying to do is help Dad understand that in order to move forward. I'm sure he does, and I'm sure he's very supportive of what you're doing, and but what I'm trying to do is let's get Dad not just involved in the schooling, but in the relational component of making things happen. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If Dad can support you in that, he'll have a real strong influence on his son because Dad already has the relational component there, and when we have relationship, that's a great opportunity to transfer values. Values and cooperation and so on, things like that. Does it make sense?
Yes. Yep.
All right. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up the phone lines and let other people ask some questions. What I'm hoping you'll do is take some of the ideas we've shared here and develop a plan for you and Eric. Don't make the plan, hey, Eric, I'm coming and telling you the plan, but say, I've got some ideas for the plan, Eric, and we'll move forward. All right, folks.
Right, yep.
Ask people to raise their hands.
If anybody wants to raise their hand by pushing the little button somewhere on the... Where's the button in here anyway?
The button doesn't show up on ours, but it does show up for them.
It's on the bottom of the box under the participants' names, right above the chat, the word chat.
Right above the word chat. Okay, great. All right, let's...
Can we just speak if we're on the phone?
Well, we have everybody muted, so we only...
Okay.
I don't know which line Elizabeth is on.
Okay, Elizabeth. Are you talking? Go ahead. Is that Elizabeth?
Yes.
Okay, Elizabeth,
Yes.
go ahead and talk to us.
I wanted to find out, you said there were 3 stages. You only gave 2. I was wondering what the third was.
Okay, very good. There are 3 stages to adolescence. The first stage goes from 12 to 16, give or take a year, characterized by emotionally driven behavior at least. There's a lot more there. And then the second stage goes from 16 to 20, give or take 2 years usually, and it is characterized by this mission-oriented view of life, more judgment coming into your life. The third stage of adolescence is launching, and usually goes from age 20 to 25, give or take 2 years, and that's helping a child become independent. Some children become independent at 18 years old and they're ready to take care of themselves, but this involves several things in the launching stage. 1, being able to manage your own finances. 2, being able to solve problems. 3, being a part of a spiritual community so you can get support when you need it. Being able to have a job that's paying you money so you're independent. Being able to handle insurance kinds of issues. Being able to solve your car problems. All of those things are in that launching stage, and we're helping a child balance a checkbook, manage a credit card. All of those things happen in that last stage of adolescence to develop some independence. Once the child is launched, now you're out of the childhood stage, and that your parenting's never over, but we're not in childhood anymore. Now we're into some kind of a relationship of adult relationship where we still have we're giving advice and caring for our kids and participating in their lives. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds older. Like most people. I thought adolescence ended prior to age 18.
Thank you. Yes, and let me just clarify that. In our culture, we see adolescence starting earlier nowadays, and we see we see it going later, and that has to do with some cultural issues. We see that boys and girls are reaching puberty earlier, often 9, 10 years old sometimes. That doesn't mean that they're in adolescence, but it means that the whole process is starting earlier in their lives. Certainly by 12 years old, most kids have entered adolescence. Then adolescence doesn't end many times because of the socioeconomic conditions of our world, being able to manage oneself and be independent financially, have a job that they can really take care of themselves instead of just working at McDonald's. All of that often takes a little bit of time to develop. So many young people today aren't even getting married till 25 to 27 years of age. All of that is because adolescence is moving further down on both sides. And so, yes, it is surprising, but when we come to parenting, That's where we are in many of these situations, okay?
Scott, Allison has a question.
Allison, go ahead.
Allison, can you hear us?
Why don't you leave Allison open for a moment? Let's see, let me ask you this. If you've raised your hand, maybe it's not Allison, maybe we have the wrong name. If you've raised your hand, go ahead and start talking. Okay. If someone else would like to ask a question, you can. I'm going to summarize some of the things we're talking about because there's some things I started to share, but I didn't share completely as we were talking to Michelle. I shared with you that there are 5 parts of a good plan. When I say a plan, I'm talking about an action plan to get us from point A to point B. In Eric's case, Eric is not responsive to authority. We're trying to help him develop cooperation. That's the heart quality we're trying to develop. There are 5 steps to a good plan. I shared some of them with you. One of those is firmness. Very important to move children from point A because point A can be very comfortable. And we're trying to move to point B. And point B is this heart quality we're trying to develop. So firmness gets us off of point A, but at point B, we want to have visioning. Visioning is it's why. Why do we want to get to point B? Why do I want to be cooperative anyway? Whether we're dealing with Eric or any of our kids, if we're moving toward some form of cooperation, there has to be some reasons why we're doing that. And so we're saying it's going to help you to be a better employee someday. It'll help you to be a better mate. You're going to be a great dad someday when we work on this. If it's anger control, then your self-control, if you can deal with this, you're going to be able to help a lot of other people with this. So there's a lot of visioning that goes into point B. We're not just always talking about what we want kids to stop. We're talking about what we want them to develop in their own hearts. That's why we're getting to point B. That's visioning. The third part is praying for our kids. We talked about that already, and praying for ourselves. And part 4, or the 4th part of a good plan, is teaching our kids what we want from them or showing them how to get from point A to point B. That's teaching them how to handle their anger, or teaching them what it means to be respectful, or what are they supposed to say to themselves when they don't want to do what mom's asking them to do or they disagree. That's all the teaching them how, and we've got to do a lot of teaching in order to move forward with children. And the 5th part of your plan is going to be coaching. Having an attitude with a young person that says, okay, we made a mistake here, let's go forward. So we have this coaching attitude that's helping them move from one place to another. That's going to help you get in those different places.
Scott, Dinah's been waiting with a question.
Okay, Dinah, go ahead.
Hi, I have a 13-year-old girl that she seems to be always complaining, negative. Whenever I ask her to do something, it's a big hassle, or has a hard time. And I don't like to see her unhappy. And I have talked to her about it, and we have had conversations, but I don't know how to move forward with that. How long do we try it until she moves on?
Okay, so
I'm not getting that part.
what are you trying so far that you're feeling frustrated with? What have we done already?
Well, I can take privileges from her, not having friends over, not going to sleepovers, just things that she might like. But that's changing her behavior again. But
Yes.
the attitude, she might not respond, but have the eyes rolling, and you can just see her facial expression.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. What do you want her to do instead?
I have told her. I said, listen, all you gotta do, it's just tell me, okay, Mom, I'll do it. Even if you don't do it right away, but just not get into an argument. I have even told her, this is how you can respond to the situation. But I'm not sure what else to do.
Okay. All right. Let me say this. The teen years become a culmination of a lot of our parenting for many people because, and this is where it gets frustrating, because it used to work that if we take things away from kids, they generally respond and they comply. But sometimes children get into bad patterns and we start taking more and more away from them. And so we come to the conclusion that says, look, I've tried everything we can do. I've taken everything we can from this child. We had a 16-year-old we were working with a few weeks ago. Parents said, we've had her in grounded for 6 years. We had him grounded for 6 years. He doesn't have anything left in his bedroom. We lock him in his bedroom. We've done everything we can as parents. So obviously, when we come into the situation, then we're trying to bring a whole nother batch of solutions. We can use consequences, and we have to use consequences as part of our firmness with our teenagers, but we have to use a whole nother approach as we are working with our teens. Part of what we can do is we have to focus on what we want them to do instead. In your case, your daughter, who's 13 years old, is, again, driven by this emotional behavior, and she's not happy with what you've asked her to do, and so she's not responding. I would suggest that what we want from her is we want to develop this whole concept of honor more. Now, we define honor this way. Honor is treating people as special, doing more than what's expected, and having a good attitude. That's what honor is. Now, honor is not an optional thing. I mean, God says that children should honor their father and mother. It mentions 8 times in the Bible. It's one of those things that has to be developed. It sounds to me like that's what your daughter's lacking, is honor. And so we have to develop some honor in her life. But I don't think we're going to develop this by restricting her some more, or taking away freedom. We may have to do that as part of the plan, but that's not going to be our focus. Our focus now is not on what you're not doing, it's what we want you to do instead. So we're moving in this other direction. We're going to do that in a number of different ways. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to require from her some honor actions. Honor means doing more than what's expected. Or let's do it a different way for her. Well, let's say honor is adding energy to family life. So what I would do is I would identify some things that she'd enjoy doing, like she wants to go out with her friends or she wants to have a sleepover, and I would say, look, I would be willing to allow you to do that as long as you're adding energy to this home. Show me how you're going to add energy. If there's brothers and sisters in the family, that's fine, or doing some of the household work, or just even saying thank you or contributing to her relationship with you. All of that is adding energy to family life, and that's what we're trying to motivate her to do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now, you may have to say now, because now we've got the target. We have to have a target of where we're going with our young people that says, okay, one of the things that'll make you successful in your teenage years, or when you get into the workplace, or this is one of those things you learn in family life, is honor. Therefore, and for you, honor is adding energy to family life. That's what we're going to ask you to do. You'll add energy to other places at times, and maybe you already are doing that. But what I want you to do is add energy around our home. And if you do that, then we'll allow you to have some of the freedoms that you would like. Freedoms such as going to a friend's house, or watching a TV show, or playing on a computer, or getting on the computer at all. Those are all freedoms that are given to a child only if they're being responsible in this area of honor. And demonstrating that honor then becomes something that turns her from being self-focused, complaining about things that she doesn't like, which it sounds like what you're saying, to moving toward adding energy to family life, thinking about other people, not just about myself. Now, this is going to be a strategy that's going to last a little while in your family, because it's building some new heart qualities in her that will help her to be more successful all throughout her teenage years. One thing that may help you when you give her a task to do, as you've already said, you give her a task and you'd be grateful if she'd just give you a positive answer, even if she didn't do it right away. I think what you want to say to her is this, and you say this to her all the time when you give her an assignment. We have some clothes in the dryer, need to be moved out of there. It's your job. What's your plan? So you want to be asking her, what's your plan? And if she says, I'll do it tonight, you say, well, wait a minute, I've got to do my laundry here in a little bit, so we can't wait till tonight. You've got to change your plan. It's got to be sometime in the next hour. You've got to get up and start moving your laundry along so that I can do my laundry. Or in the next 15 minutes, whatever you want to say. But you're saying, what's your plan? And when a young person says, okay, I'll do it at 2 o'clock, you say, okay, that's fine. I won't bother you then. I won't be nagging you, because we'll move forward and do this at 2 o'clock. So when you say to a young person, what's your plan, you're transferring responsibility to them, and then you're holding them accountable to that plan. You can't come back at 2 and say, what's your plan again? You say, okay, you said 2 o'clock. I expect you to get up now and go deal with it now. It needs to be done now. That's what we agreed on. And then we go back to the firmness again in order to move forward. Does that help you a bit?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, let's go to someone else. Joanne, what do we got?
Scott, Allison was having trouble with her microphone before, and she typed in a question, but now I think her microphone might be working. So you want to try and talk with her, or shall I
Sure.
read her question?
Well, let's start by talking. Allison, can you hear me? So I don't think so. So let's go ahead and read Allison's question.
All right, Allison. Goodness.
Allison has a long question. You can
Well-
make that box bigger if you want.
Oh, what do you know? Okay, Allison says we have a lot of anger from our two teens, 16-year-old boy and 14-year-old girl. They take out frustration from me by resisting church. They were raised in Christian private schools through grade 8. We moved to a new state and we're having trouble getting them to go to the new church or youth group.
Okay, and so Allison, Joanne is monitoring this chat, and so you can add any comments you want along the way, and she will share them with me, okay? All right, so we've got a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old. They went to a Christian private school, so they've had a lot of faith-ish things come at them, and they're resisting that. First thing I want to do is I want to separate them and work with them independently. Whatever you do in this particular area of faith, you don't want to talk to them at the same time or make this a collaborative issue. You're working with your 16-year-old differently than your 14-year-old, and you're trying to help them. Now, if we're focusing on this area of church, then we're focusing primarily on spirituality. Church is just one piece of that. We're going to require church. You don't have a choice. You go to a youth group, whether you want to go to youth group or not, we're going there. That's what needs to happen here. And then we're also going to have to deal with some other spirituality kinds of issues, because our primary objective for these two kids, independently now, is we're going to help them recognize that that God is real, that God is the answer for their life, because we have two goals here. These become your goals. So I was talking to a family last week about whether the child should clean his room or not, and I said, I don't know. Let me find out. Let me talk to him. And as I talked to him, I realized that he wasn't really committed to Christ at this point. And so the two primary goals you have with your 14 and your 16-year-old are these. Number one, to help them accept Jesus Christ as their personal Savior now. I'm not worried about what happened when they were 8 or 10 or 6 or 4, when they may have made a profession of faith to Christ. I'm talking about now, that they have Christ living and active in their life now. That's our primary objective, and we're trying to communicate the value of that. The second thing is to recognize that God's prescription for life, according to His Word, is the best way to live. God's values are the best ways to live. Now, those two things become the most important parts of your agenda as you're working with your kids in order to help them to respond properly to life and to get the most out of life. Those are our goals. So whether you have them clean the room or not, as in this other family, isn't as important. You may have them clean the room. That may be really important, okay? But it's not as important as doing some of these other things that we're trying to work on. And whether we have them clean the room depends on how we're doing in those other areas.
Scott, Allison is feeling like they're resisting faith just as a way of expressing their anger. She believes that the real issue is their anger.
Okay, anger with what? Anger because they moved recently?
Anger with the move, yes.
Okay, so they're unhappy because they were torn away from their friends and so on. Okay, very important. Again, let's go back to individual relationships with these kids. Each one separately. Don't work with them together. We talked to the 14-year-old and want to say, you know, moving was an upsetting experience. And so we're going to do a number of things, because here's what's happened. Your 14-year-old and your 16-year-old, it sounds like, just a little bit I'm getting here, is that they've experienced hurt in their life. Hurt anger is different than frustration anger. You got to understand that. Hurt anger, we have a whole different approach for hurt anger. When hurt comes into a person's life, they need to know how to respond to the hurt and pain in life. In this case, it sounds to me like your kids were hurt by the move inside their hearts. They lost their friends. They have to adapt to a new school situation, new neighborhood, new living conditions. All of those things were difficult for them. And to have a response of anger is a unhealthy response in this kind of situation. A better response is sorrow. It's a more healthy response. The person who develops anger on the inside becomes an angry person. So there's several things I'm going to do here to help change their response to their current situation. One is we're going to use a number of statements. One is angry people are unhappy people. And I want to help you. You don't have to live this way. We can make some changes here. Angry people are unhappy people. That's why I want to give you a plan. Number two, you're right. Okay, you're right that it was not great for us to move, and you lost some friends. I understand all of that, but it's not good enough to be right. You also need to be wise. There's a lot of people who are right who are very angry because they think that their anger is justified, and that's probably where your kids are, where they believe that their anger is justified because it creates some difficult things for them. Furthermore, one of the things, so we're going to tell them it's not good enough to be right. You also need to be wise. There's a different response. Now, I understand also from your comment here that Dad tends to be rather authoritarian. That is, he comes on and uses power, probably, and uses his strength to control the situation. In those kind of situations, they're probably further experiencing some hurt by that instead of having a relational approach with their dad. You can be very helpful here, not criticizing Dad as much, but helping them know how to process the pain that they're experiencing in life. It would be better if Dad were more relational than authoritarian. Not saying that he can't be firm with them. Firmness is important, but he probably wants to be more relational with them. So we're moving forward here in order to help them understand and process this. So you're meeting with your 16-year-old alone, and you're saying to her, I understand that Dad can be a challenge sometimes because he's coming on strong here. But let me tell you how you can get along with Dad more effectively. Or let me help you understand how to process this well so that we don't have a problem inside your heart. We don't want to get you to grow up to be an angry and bitter person. You got to be able to process this well, and I can help you do that. So you're coming alongside here in order to move things along. That's what we're trying to do here in order to be more effective. Does that make sense? Oh, she can't answer me. Does that make
yes.
sense? Yes.
She says yes.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you for commenting. All right. It looks like Cinda had a question that we didn't get to.
She did. She's going to call in by phone.
Let me ask you a question.
But she had to drive.
Wasn't Cinda someone who wanted to be a featured person?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to suggest this. We're going to have to talk to Cinda if she wants to be featured for next week. There's so much here in the teenage dilemma of frustration. We didn't really get into a lot of the anger issues here. We're talking about relationship building. We're talking about setting limits. All those are important, but there's a lot more here in the teenage dilemma, and maybe some of you want to continue this dialogue. So I think what we'll do, we'll have to make a decision based on interest here. You're all going to receive an evaluation here in just a few minutes because we're going to have to end this webinar now. And give us some comments on your evaluation. Tell us about your experience here so we can understand it. We'll make a decision as to whether to pick this particular subject up next week, or maybe we'll postpone it into December and have another webinar. We're going to be doing this with different topics every week when we're around. I happen to be going to Africa in a couple of weeks to spend time with my children, so I won't be around but for a couple of weeks. But we'll spend some time in November, and then we'll get together back in December, and we can continue some of these same topics. If you have an idea of something you want to talk about here, we can we didn't
turn the video on. They haven't been watching us.
No.
Dinah told us. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right.
Thank you, Dinah, for letting us know.
Okay. Well, we're learning, and we're going to do this better. But anyway, we can talk about this more as we continue on and give you some ideas of how to work with your teenagers. We've got lots of ideas. We can only accomplish a certain amount in such a short a time. But we have lots more to share. So if there's interest, you want to talk more about particular issues, tell us. We need featured parents in order to go forward, and we'll do that. We've got some other questions that parents want to address as well, so we'll make a decision about where we're going from here. In the meantime, fill out the evaluation, the feedback. We'd really appreciate that, and as a token of our appreciation, we'll give you a discount coupon code that you can use in our web store. Just fill out the evaluation, and you'll learn more about that, all right? Thank you very much, folks. We appreciate you being on this call with us. If you want to receive free email parenting tips with us, you can sign up for them at our website at biblicalparenting.org. God bless you and have a great evening.